In the quiet suburbs of Georgetown, Texas, the year 2015 would be remembered for a disappearance that baffled both citizens and law enforcement alike. A case so haunting, so inexplicable, that even a decade later, it still lingers in whispers across small-town diners and night patrol shifts. It began not with a violent scene or a frantic 911 call, but with an empty car parked on a back road, the driver's badge still sitting on the dashboard. That car belonged to Detective Michael Raines, a 37-year-old veteran of the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. Known among his colleagues as meticulous and fearless, Raines was the kind of officer who stayed late, skipped lunch, and carried case files home long after others clocked out. He wasn't the type to vanish. On a warm August evening, Raines had left the station after a routine day, driving his silver Chevy Impala toward the outskirts of town. He was supposed to stop by a friend's house for dinner. He never arrived. By midnight, his phone went straight to voicemail. And by morning, his car was found abandoned near an old farm road, doors unlocked, engine cold, his service weapon still in its holster. The entire department went into overdrive. Local news channels picked up the story within hours, calling it the detective who vanished. But what began as a missing persons case soon turned into something far more disturbing. Because as the days passed, strange details emerged, details that didn't make sense. Witnesses claimed to have seen his car parked in 2 different locations that night. Surveillance footage showed the vehicle passing through a toll station hours after Raines was last seen on camera. And yet, when authorities checked the GPS logs, the timestamps didn't align. Something, or someone, was tampering with the timeline. Before long, whispers of corruption, cover-ups, and double lives began to surface. Could a detective investigating a dangerous case have stumbled into something he wasn't supposed to see? Or was his disappearance the result of a carefully orchestrated plan from within? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling story of Detective Michael Raines, and the night Texas lost one of its own. To understand the mystery of Detective Michael Raines, you have to know the man behind the badge. Born and raised in Lubbock, Texas, Michael was the oldest of 3 boys in a family of teachers and preachers. He wasn't the loud type, never the kind to chase spotlight or status, but he had a deep sense of right and wrong that set him apart early. His colleagues would later say that Raines didn't just enforce the law, he lived by it. By 2015, he had already built a solid reputation in the Williamson County Sheriff's Department. His peers respected him, his superiors trusted him, and the community knew his name. Raines specialized in missing person cases, a grim irony considering how his own life would end up echoing his work. He'd closed more than a dozen disappearances over his career, and according to old reports, he carried every one of those faces with him. Outside the badge, Raines led a quiet, almost solitary life. Divorced 3 years earlier, he lived in a modest 2-bedroom home near Lake Georgetown with his dog, a black Labrador named Scout. His neighbors described him as polite but private. He mowed his own lawn, attended church irregularly, and never stayed out late. To most people, he seemed grounded, a man holding it all together. But in the weeks before his disappearance, something had changed. His close friend, Detective Sarah Keene, would later tell investigators that Raines had grown distant, distracted. "He was working something off the books," she said. "He wouldn't tell me what, but I could see it was eating him alive." Co-workers remembered him staying late in the records room, combing through old case files, sometimes requesting documents from the archives that had no connection to his current assignments. He'd also been spotted at a few abandoned properties on the outskirts of Jarrell, a small town 20 minutes north. When asked, Raines brushed it off as a personal project. The last 48 hours of his life were a blur of odd behavior. On August 11th, he left his desk early and drove to Austin, where he withdrew $800 in cash from an ATM, unusual for a man who rarely carried more than $20 in his wallet. He also made 2 phone calls that night, one to a retired informant and another to an unknown number later traced to a disposable prepaid phone. Neither call was ever recovered in full. The following morning, Raines showed up to the station looking exhausted. He skipped the morning briefing, locked himself in his office, and stared at a corkboard filled with pinned photos, many of them from unsolved missing person cases. His partner recalled one chilling thing he said before leaving that day. "Sometimes we think we're chasing the missing, but what if they were never missing at all?" At 6:47 p.m., Raines clocked out and got into his silver Chevy Impala. His dashcam would later record the first 15 minutes of his drive, normal traffic, familiar routes. Then the footage cuts out abruptly at a rural intersection near County Road 210. No signs of struggle. No signs of pursuit. Just silence. At 8 p.m., a friend named Lisa Monroe texted him, asking if he was still coming for dinner. The message was marked "Delivered," but it was never read. Cell tower data placed his phone in the Twin Oaks area, a sparsely populated stretch of farmland and gravel roads. By 10 p.m., his car was seen briefly on a convenience store camera 30 miles away, in a direction opposite from where he should have been. The driver's face was obscured by glare, but one unsettling detail stood out. The driver appeared to be wearing Raines's jacket. The following morning, when Detective Keene arrived at the station and saw that Raines hadn't signed in, she called dispatch. Within hours, patrol units were combing every road between Georgetown and Jarrell. At 9:15 a.m., Officer Drew Keller spotted a vehicle matching Raines's description parked on a dirt pull-off near an abandoned grain silo. The car doors were unlocked, engine cold, and the keys still in the ignition. Inside, investigators found his badge, phone, wallet, and service pistol, all untouched. No footprints led away from the car. No tire tracks indicated another vehicle. It was as if the detective had simply opened his door and vanished into thin air. For the department, it was unthinkable. For the town, it was terrifying. Within 24 hours, the case of the missing detective became national news. Local TV anchors described him as a dedicated officer taken under mysterious circumstances. The sheriff's office issued a public statement promising a full-scale investigation. But behind closed doors, the mood was grim. There was no ransom note, no threats, and no evidence of foul play. Still, something about that car bothered investigators. The seat position had been adjusted too far back for Raines's height. The rear-view mirror was tilted upward, as if someone taller had driven it. And in the trunk, a single sheet of paper lay folded neatly beneath a flashlight. It contained a list of 5 names, all written in Raines's handwriting. Each name corresponded to a person who had vanished from the county between 2009 and 2014, none of whose cases had ever been solved. Detective Michael Raines had clearly been working on something before he disappeared. Something dangerous enough to make him the next name on his own list. When Detective Michael Raines's car was found on the side of County Road 214, the scene was so pristine, so undisturbed, that investigators initially thought the vehicle had been staged. The silver Chevy Impala sat half-hidden beneath an oak tree, angled just enough off the gravel road to look accidental, but the deeper they looked, the more it felt deliberate. The doors were unlocked. The keys still in the ignition. The gear in park. The driver's seat pushed back too far for Raines's 5 feet 11 inches frame, suggesting someone else had driven last. Inside the glove compartment lay his department-issued Glock, unfired and clean, and his badge in its leather wallet. His phone, however, had been wiped. Call logs were missing, messages deleted, and even his Google timeline, usually automatic, had stopped updating at 7:04 p.m. the night before. That's the moment the trail went cold. At first, the sheriff's office assumed Raines had gone rogue or suffered a breakdown. But those theories evaporated when they noticed what wasn't in the car, his laptop. It was standard issue, always kept in the trunk for field reports, and Raines never went anywhere without it. Investigators found the dock empty, cables unplugged. Whoever had last been in that car had taken the one piece of equipment that might explain where he was going. And that wasn't the only anomaly. The car's odometer showed 43 extra miles added after Raines's last confirmed sighting. That meant the vehicle had been driven well after he was seen leaving the station. GPS trackers indicated the Impala had made 2 unusual stops during that window, one near Belton Lake and another outside a derelict property once used as a concrete plant. When deputies canvassed those areas, they found tire impressions that matched Raines's vehicle, but no footprints, no drag marks, no evidence of struggle. Just emptiness. Detective Sarah Keene, who'd worked alongside Raines for 7 years, was among the first at the scene. She later recalled how unsettling it felt standing beside his car that morning. It looked like he just stepped out to stretch his legs and vanished. No scuff marks, no broken brush, nothing. It was too clean. The Texas Rangers were called in within 48 hours. Lead investigator Ranger Cole Ashworth, a 20-year veteran, described the case as eerily clinical. In his report, he noted that Raines's car had been wiped down, but not completely. Forensic technicians lifted a faint partial print from the steering wheel that didn't match Raines or anyone in law enforcement databases. It was later determined to belong to a woman. That discovery changed everything. Suddenly, the narrative shifted from an officer who disappeared to a possible abduction. Media outlets exploded with speculation, affairs, corruption, secret investigations, but the department stayed silent. Behind closed doors, they had only fragments. The list of 5 names found in Raines's trunk was now their only solid lead. Each of those names led to a missing person case between 2009 and 2014. Emily Voss, 2009, 28, disappeared on her way home from a nursing shift. Gregory Tate, 2010, 42, contractor, last seen near Jarrell. Monica Dyer, 2011, 19, college student, vanished during a road trip. Aaron Keller, 2012, 34, truck driver, route ended abruptly on Highway 79. Cynthia Morales, 2014, 31, single mother, missing after reporting a stalker. 5 people. 5 open cases. All within a 60-mile radius. Raines had apparently been digging into these disappearances on his own. And though none of them were officially connected, the deeper investigators looked, the more disturbing coincidences surfaced. Each victim had used the same gas station in Twin Oaks shortly before vanishing. And each had a link, however faint, to a defunct trucking company once based in Belton. That trucking company, Red Mesa Freight, had gone bankrupt in 2013 following an embezzlement scandal. The owner, Thomas Rayner, was questioned at the time but never charged. When investigators revisited the company records after Raines's disappearance, they found something odd: a list of consultants with no listed addresses, one of which was Michael Raines. No one in the sheriff's office had ever heard of Raines doing outside work. Ranger Ashworth described it bluntly: either someone forged that file, or Raines stumbled into something he shouldn't have. As days turned into weeks, the case took on a life of its own. Residents began to leave flowers and handwritten notes where his car was found, calling it the Detective's Corner. News outlets interviewed old classmates and family members, painting Raines as both a hero and a mystery. But behind the sympathy, fear was spreading. A man trained to find the missing had vanished under the same strange conditions as those he'd been investigating. Then, on September 3rd, nearly 3 weeks after Raines's disappearance, a local hiker found something about 6 miles from the car site: a burned laptop, half buried in the dirt near a creek bed. The serial number matched the one issued to Raines. Most of the hard drive was destroyed by fire, but data recovery teams managed to extract a few files. Among them was a single unnamed folder containing photographs, low-resolution images of rural roads, abandoned gas stations, and one particularly unsettling picture: a rusted truck trailer, its door slightly ajar, with a faint symbol spray-painted on the side. That same symbol, a red M over a faded circle, had appeared in police reports from 2 of the old missing person cases Raines had been studying. When the photos were shown to Detective Keene, she said quietly. He found the connection. But the question that haunted everyone was, did he find it too late? The department now had a burned laptop, a car left untouched, a mysterious list, and a possible symbol connecting 6 disappearances, including one of their own. Yet there were no fingerprints, no bodies, and no clear motive. Only a growing sense that someone was watching every step of the investigation. By late September 2015, the disappearance of Detective Michael Raines had evolved into one of the most complex investigations in Williamson County history. A task force was formed, comprising local deputies, Texas Rangers, and FBI analysts. Yet even with federal involvement, every lead seemed to dissolve into smoke. Still, something about the symbol on that burned laptop photo wouldn't let go of the investigators' minds. The red M, painted over a faint circle, wasn't gang-related, nor was it linked to any known cult or local organization. It looked almost like a branding mark, simple, deliberate, but designed to mean something only to a few. A retired trucker who had once worked for Red Mesa Freight told authorities he'd seen that mark before, spray-painted on old trailers that were decommissioned and stored in lots between Belton and Killeen. He remembered it as a sort of internal label used to indicate vehicles slated for disposal. But when officers went to those storage sites, every trailer that should have been there had long been hauled away, scrapped, or sold under new names. One of them, however, still had paperwork trails. A rusted 1989 Fruhauf trailer, last registered to a company in Abilene, had been sold at an auction 2 years prior to a private buyer listed only as M.R. Initial speculation was that Raines himself had purchased it while investigating the link between the missing persons and Red Mesa Freight. But the date on the bill of sale, June 4, 2015, was 2 months before his disappearance. So, was he trying to follow a lead? Or had someone used his initials to mask a purchase? When investigators visited the location where that trailer was supposedly delivered, they found an empty lot. Just dirt, weeds, and faint drag marks that suggested something large had once been parked there. Neighbors said a white semi-truck had come by several times late at night during the summer but stopped appearing after August. And August, of course, was when Raines vanished. The public didn't know these details yet. The sheriff's office maintained a tight lid on information, but leaks started surfacing online. Reddit threads, Facebook groups, and amateur sleuth pages began connecting dots. Theories multiplied. Some claimed Raines had faked his own disappearance, driven by guilt or corruption. Others insisted he'd been taken by the same people responsible for the older missing cases. A few even speculated about something darker: trafficking routes, underground networks, and law enforcement complicity. Detective Sarah Keene refused to believe any of those. She kept pushing her own internal investigation, digging through Raines's old notes, text messages, and personnel records. That's when she found something the task force had overlooked: a sticky note tucked inside one of his old case files, bearing 3 cryptic words written in his handwriting. Twin Oaks Loop. 3 a.m. No date. No explanation. Keene drove there herself the following night, accompanied by a fellow officer. The area was isolated, just a strip of rural road lined with old barns and tree lines, no houses within a mile. They parked under the moonlight, lights off, waiting. At 3:17 a.m., they saw it. A faint beam of light flickered in the distance, someone holding a flashlight, moving in slow, deliberate circles near an old storage shed. By the time they approached, the figure had vanished. But inside the shed, buried beneath a layer of dust and discarded metal, they found a small wooden box. Inside that box were 2 items. 1. A Polaroid photograph of Michael Raines standing beside his Impala, time-stamped August 11th, 7:12 p.m., minutes after he supposedly vanished from traffic cams. 2. A metal tag etched with the same symbol from the burned laptop photo, a red M over a circle. This discovery sent shockwaves through the task force. The timestamp alone made no sense. The photo was taken after his car had last been seen leaving Georgetown. It showed Raines alive, calm, and looking directly at the camera. But who took it? Forensic analysts confirmed the photo's authenticity. It hadn't been digitally altered. The chemical composition of the film placed it within the right date range, which meant someone had seen Raines alive after the time he supposedly disappeared, and deliberately planted that evidence. The FBI began exploring psychological and behavioral profiles. One theory proposed that Raines had stumbled upon a cover operation, perhaps tied to illicit transport or corruption within the trucking industry. Another theory, whispered among some locals, was that Raines had been silenced because he got too close to identifying someone powerful. A darker idea surfaced in late October when technicians decrypted fragments from the burned laptop's recovered files. One of those fragments contained a list labeled R9 records. Each line contained a string of numbers, GPS coordinates, and initials. Most of the coordinates pointed to remote fields or empty lots across central Texas. The ninth coordinate, however, led directly to the same stretch of road where his car had been found. Coincidence? Or breadcrumb? Investigators revisited the site with ground-penetrating radar. They found disturbed soil roughly 40 feet behind the oak tree. When they dug, they didn't find a body, but they did find a broken police radio, half-melted from heat exposure, and a burned leather holster still stamped with the department's insignia. It matched Raines's issued gear. But once again, no trace of him. By November, hope of finding Raines alive began to fade. Media coverage died down, and the sheriff's office quietly scaled back search efforts. Yet Detective Keene refused to let the case go cold. She began receiving anonymous emails from an untraceable address, all containing one phrase in the subject line. "You're digging where he stopped. No body, no ransom, no confession. Just silence and that lingering mark." The red M over the circle, appearing again and again in unexpected places. And somewhere between the files, the fear, and the fragments of a man who'd tried to uncover too much, the line between hunter and hunted was beginning to blur. By early 2016, nearly 6 months had passed since Detective Michael Raines vanished, and the case had fallen into that gray zone every investigator dreads, too cold for media, too strange for closure. Officially, the file was still marked active missing, but within the walls of the Williamson County Sheriff's Office, most had quietly moved on. Except Detective Sarah Keene. She refused to let the story end that way. Every night after her shift, she stayed behind, combing through Raines's recovered notes, burnt files, and fragmented GPS data. "It didn't feel random," she later told a local journalist. "Every piece of evidence felt like it was trying to point somewhere." Her persistence finally paid off in February, when she noticed something hidden within the R9 records coordinates list from Raines's laptop. The coordinates weren't random, they formed a pattern. When mapped out, they created a rough circle encompassing multiple counties in central Texas. And dead in the center of that circle lay an abandoned red Mesa freight lot, closed since 2013. The location was officially sealed due to hazardous materials, but Keene managed to get temporary clearance through the Rangers. On February 12, accompanied by 2 deputies, she entered the old property for the first time in nearly a decade. The place was eerily silent, rows of decaying trailers, collapsed sheds, and weather-worn company signs half buried in tall grass. Keene described it as a graveyard for trucks. As they advanced deeper into the yard, they noticed something peculiar. Nearly every trailer had its identification number removed, except one. The number M014 was spray-painted faintly in red, over a circle of chipped white paint. That symbol again. They pried the trailer door open. Inside, the air was thick and metallic, carrying the smell of rust and something far worse, rot. Old blankets lay in the corners, alongside plastic bins and a single folding chair. On the floor, half covered by dirt, was a set of Polaroids sealed in a plastic sleeve. When Keene pulled them out, her heart stopped. The photos showed the 5 missing persons from Raines's list, each photographed in different settings, each visibly alive at the time the pictures were taken. The final photo was of Raines himself, sitting on the same folding chair inside that same trailer, staring blankly ahead. The timestamp: August 12, 2015, 2:04 a.m. 8 hours after his car had been found. The images were quickly taken into evidence. The media was kept in the dark while forensics analyzed them. The photos were authentic, no manipulation, no digital artifacts. Whoever had taken them had used the same type of Polaroid film found in Raines's earlier box discovery. But there was one more clue. In the corner of one photo, barely visible behind Raines, was the blurred outline of a man wearing a reflective vest, possibly belonging to a truckyard employee. His face was hidden by glare, but a partial name tag on the vest read, Ray. It didn't take long to connect that fragment. Thomas Rayner, the former owner of Red Mesa Freight. Rayner had vanished himself in 2013, right before his company collapsed amid the embezzlement scandal. His house in Belton had been abandoned, his bank accounts drained, and investigators assumed he fled the state. But Keene wasn't convinced. She believed Rayner never left. He just went underground. With renewed urgency, search warrants were issued across properties once tied to Rayner. That's when a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A contractor named Elias Montrose reported finding a buried metal container while doing foundation work at a rural property outside Salado, a property that had been owned by one of Rayner's shell companies. Inside the container were ledgers, IDs, and several photographs. One ID card immediately stood out: Michael Raines's department badge, scorched but intact. But it was what came with it that sent chills through the room: a hand-drawn map with intersecting red lines connecting all the old missing persons' locations. At the bottom, in smudged black ink, was written, "They were never missing. They were moved." It was Raines's handwriting. This discovery reignited the case and drew national attention once again. For the first time, authorities publicly acknowledged that Raines had been investigating a possible organized disappearance network tied to Red Mesa Freight's defunct operations, using abandoned trailers as mobile holding units. But that raised a haunting question. If Raines uncovered this much before vanishing, why didn't he report it? Why was he alone? Then came the final twist. 2 weeks after the Salado discovery, a local farmer called 911 after spotting something strange near his irrigation ditch: a rusted semi-truck trailer, half submerged in the soil, its registration scratched off. When authorities opened it, they found human remains sealed in makeshift compartments. Forensics would later confirm DNA matches to 3 of the 5 missing persons on Raines's list. The trailer's exterior, marked faintly with a red M over a white circle. Inside one of the compartments, lodged between the metal panels, investigators found a police-issued flashlight engraved with Raines's initials. He had been there. Whether as prisoner or pursuer, no one could tell. The sheriff's office issued a statement calling it the most significant break in the case since Raines's disappearance. But even as answers seemed closer, new questions emerged. If Rayner orchestrated this network, why did his trail vanish in 2013? Who continued the operation afterward? And most unsettling of all, if Raines discovered all this, who took that final photo of him alive inside the trailer? For Detective Keene, the discovery wasn't closure, it was confirmation that Raines had been right all along. He had uncovered something vast, dangerous, and hidden beneath the surface of their own county. And now, the people behind it knew she was looking too. By spring of 2016, the Texas sun had already baked the fields surrounding Red Mesa's forgotten truckyard, but the cold that followed Detective Michael Raines's disappearance still hung heavy over Williamson County. The community had tried to move forward, but every new discovery kept dragging them back into the shadows of the case. The finding of human remains inside the buried trailer had ignited a second wave of investigation, and this time, the state wasn't handling it quietly. The Texas Rangers, FBI, and Department of Public Safety pooled resources to uncover what they now suspected was a multi-state trafficking and cover-up ring operating under the guise of the old Red Mesa Freight Network. And in the center of it all, Still unsolved, still unexplained, was the fate of Detective Michael Raines. Detective Sarah Keene had become both the lead investigator and the last believer that he might still be alive. "Every clue he left feels intentional," she said in an interview years later. "He knew the end was coming. He wanted us to see what he saw." But the trail that once seemed clear began to twist in unsettling ways. Among the records recovered from the buried container near Salado, one ledger in particular stood out. It detailed a series of coded transactions labeled M014 Transfer. When cross-referenced with Red Mesa Freight's archives, those records revealed something chilling. The same trailer number, M014, where Raines's Polaroid had been taken, had made repeated trips under private contract long after the company officially dissolved. Between 2014 and mid-2015, the trailer logged at least 9 unregistered deliveries across Texas and New Mexico. Every one of those delivery destinations corresponded to coordinates Raines had marked in his laptop's R9 records list. He wasn't just following the trail. He had already mapped the operation's entire route. But then, another anomaly surfaced. Forensic accountants discovered that one of the shell companies funding those deliveries was tied to a law enforcement pension fund. Someone inside the system had been paying to keep those trucks moving and covering their disappearance through false audits. That revelation rocked the department to its core. Overnight, investigators were told to hand over all active evidence to a federal task force. Files were sealed, new clearance levels introduced. And just like that, the Raines case slipped from local hands into bureaucratic darkness. Still, Keene wouldn't let it die. She made copies of what she could, photos, maps, fragments of emails, and continued her own quiet pursuit. That's when she found something that froze her blood. Inside one of Raines's old evidence envelopes, taped beneath the folder's flap, was a small SD card. It was labeled simply, "Night Run." When she loaded it into her laptop, the screen filled with distorted night vision footage. The timestamp read August 11, 2015, 11:48 p.m., the night Raines vanished. The video was shaky, filmed from a body camera or phone. It showed a rural dirt road, headlights flickering in the distance, and the faint outline of an 18-wheeler trailer parked under a large oak tree, the same location where his Impala had been found. In the background, a man's voice whispered, "They're not missing. They're moving them." The camera panned briefly to the left, showing another figure, broad-shouldered, wearing a reflective vest. The same partial name tag visible from the earlier Polaroid, Ray. Then the frame jolted violently, the lens tilting toward the ground as if dropped. The last 2 seconds captured the sound of footsteps, a muffled yell, and a metallic clang. The screen went black. Experts later confirmed that the voice belonged to Raines. That footage was the closest thing to an answer the case ever produced, and the beginning of its next mystery. When Keene tried to submit the SD card into federal custody 2 days later, it was missing. Her office had been entered overnight, her desk drawers rifled through. Security footage from the building's hallway between 1 and 3 a.m. showed a power outage conveniently cutting out every camera feed on her floor. From that point forward, Sarah Keene began receiving the same anonymous emails that once haunted Raines. Each contained a single phrase, "You're digging where he stopped." By 2017, official reports listed the Raines disappearance as unresolved. The federal task force handling the case provided no updates. Public interest waned. But inside law enforcement circles, the whispers never stopped. Some believed Raines had been silenced for uncovering corruption too close to home. Others thought he had gone into hiding, leaving clues intentionally so someone like Keene could finish his work. A few dared to suggest he was still alive, working deep undercover in the same network he once tried to expose. Then, in August 2020, 5 years to the day after his disappearance, a maintenance crew cleaning storm drains near Belton Lake discovered something strange, a police badge wedged in the grate. The number matched Detective Michael Raines. It looked new, untarnished by time, as if it had been placed there recently. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no explanation. Just a quiet reminder that the story wasn't over. To this day, residents still drive past the bend on County Road 214 where his car was found. Some leave flowers, others leave small toy badges. They call it the Detective's Corner, a roadside memorial to a man who may have uncovered one truth too many. And though no one knows whether he's dead or alive, one thing remains certain. Whatever Michael Raines found in the final hours of his life, it was powerful enough to erase him. Even after years of searching, the disappearance of Detective Michael Raines remains one of the most unsettling mysteries in modern Texas history. A decorated officer, a husband, a man who spent his life uncovering truth, vanished in a single night, leaving behind nothing but a trail of questions too dangerous to answer. The files, the hidden footage, the mysterious badge found years later, each fragment adds another layer to the puzzle, but none have brought closure. Every theory, from corruption to secret investigations, feels possible. And that's what makes this story so haunting. It isn't just about what happened to one detective, it's about what his disappearance revealed. Behind every missing person case lies a chain of choices, secrets, and silences. Some vanish by circumstance. Others vanish by design. And sometimes, when the truth gets too close to power, it disappears along with the person who found it. For the families left behind, the absence never fades. For the officers who still remember him, the unanswered questions are a scar that never heals. And for the rest of us, watching, wondering, we're left to ask, how can a man dedicated to solving disappearances become one himself? Maybe somewhere out there, Michael Raines still walks under a different name, carrying the evidence no one was meant to see. Or maybe the answers lie buried beneath the same Texas soil where his badge was found. Either way, his story stands as a chilling reminder. Truth doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes, it demands a price. Pause, fade tone. If you found this story haunting, mysterious, or thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue uncovering stories that deserve to be heard, the ones that keep you awake long after the video ends. And as always, stay curious, stay safe, and never stop asking questions. Because somewhere in Texas, the case of Detective Michael Raines still waits for its final answer.